The Gitmob have landed, and they're off the leash. From Snarlpack Cavalry to Sunstealer Wheelers, the Snarlfangs are the real leaders. And their wily alpha, Jagged Snarls, is the one who picks the new fearsome grot leader to take the mantle of Sunchomper, rallying the Gitmobs for a good old scrap. With so many Snarlfangs about to charge into the scene, there are bound to be a few different fur colours out there. Hello and welcome. Today I'm painting 3 different shades of fur on some Snarlfangs in a quick and easy fashion, using contrast paints to build up the different schemes. So let's pop open the paints and get painting. On screen now is the list of paints we'll be using today to paint up these 3 furs to completion, along with the extra tools and brushes we've used. But obviously feel free to swap out any of these for something you prefer. If you're new to painting and want to know more about the paints and techniques used in this video, check out the Painting Essentials playlist on our YouTube channel. I've undercoated the Snarlfangs in White Scar, Wraithbone and Greyseer as a base to help these out when I start applying contrast paints to them. Starting with a white scheme, we use the White Scar Undercoated Mini in Apothecary White straight from the pot to add some depth to the textured furs around the neck and tail, which is where contrast really shines. For the legs, use a palette to control how much paint is on the brush. Even thinning it down slightly with a drop of water can help avoid dark spots appearing on those areas. Working in sections, pull the paint downwards, letting it build up more towards the pores, and if pooling does happen, soaking up the excess with a clean brush will quickly fix those issues. After leaving the Mini to dry for around half an hour, we'll have a great shaded white to work with. Let's add some Griff Charger Grey next by thinning one part of this with 2 parts contrast medium, giving us a lighter touch to the colour when applied to the textured areas down the back and tail of the Snarlfang, whilst adding a bluish tone to the fur. And with that, we have a basis for a simple white fur that's already full of depth. The final step is to pick out the details with a small dry brush and lightly apply White Scar all over the entire model, focusing mostly on the textured furs. This will enhance the highlights and highlight the individual hairs and help clean up any areas that may appear a little patchy from the contrast paints. After tidying up the non-fur sections with the original undercoat colour, we'll be left with this clean white fur finish for our fur Snarlfang. Next, let's create a mottled fur pattern using the Wraithbone undercoated Snarlfang. To start, I'll use a sponge taken from an old carry case and dip it into some Gryph-hound orange from the lid. Take off any excess on a paper towel, like so, and when ready, lightly dab the sponge along the middle of the Snarlfang's body and slightly down each leg to create an outline. I've gone for this colour to try out an orangey coloration to the fur, whilst adding a little extra dark shading into the recesses when it dries. After completing a full circuit around the model, block everything above the dotted line using a brush and the same colour. And once filled in, an extra bit of sponging can help add in a little extra detailing across the fur, leaving a mottled transition between the first 2 colours. With the first colour applied, the next step is to use a thinned down layer of 1 part skeleton horror to 2 parts contrast medium all over the Snarlfang to tone down the entire model, making sure to soak up any excess paint if it starts to pool in any recesses. And once dry, this layer blends the 2 colours together perfectly, while shading the Wraithbone. Next is a quick dry brushing of Screaming Skull around the feet and underbelly, which will smooth out the lighter furs. Just avoid the mottled line, keeping it neat and tidy. Building up the colour in a couple of layers if needed to enhance all the details with some natural highlights. The Snarlfang is looking banging, and with one final step we can call this puppy done. Using Sigmar Brown and the trusty sponge from earlier, apply this to the top of the back and down the tail. Dab it on to darken these areas and create a speckled effect that ties the whole scheme together. Each Snarlfang is unique, and you can adjust the amount of this last stage as you see fit. I've added a little extra down the legs, even going past the speckled line. Then, using a brush to fill in any of the gaps and push the contrast paint into the recess helps sell the look. I'm so happy with how this one's turned out. Using a sponge easily elevates this paint scheme, and in no time at all the mottled fur of this Snarlfang is complete. Moving on to the last scheme with the Greyseer Snarlfang, I think I'm going to go with a dark grey-black for this one. I'm going to dry brush a lighter colour like Core XY over the undercoat, before adding contrast paints. This will add a pre-highlight across the entire model, which will add so much more variation in colour when contrast paints are added. This can be pushed once more with White Scar, adding a slightly lighter dry brushing, more towards the textured areas around the face and the pores. Dry brushing done, let's get the contrast party started. Using Basilican and Grey straight from the pot, apply it to lay a foundation over the fur. There are a few areas I'm avoiding, such as around the mouth, the tip of the tail, and this here paw for a bit of fun. A second layer straight from the pot can also be helpful across the back to darken it further. Keeping just a bit of the previous layer will also help add a transition to the colour. The areas that have been left unpainted can be tinted by thinning the paint with contrast medium and applying a transparent layer to these areas. and by having the mini highlighted before we've used these paints has left a subtle highlight to shine through. With that first layer of contrast paint on, let's grab another to darken the furs some more. I've picked out a dry brush for this next bit to stipple on Black Templar around the model. To do this, get some paint onto a brush and remove any of the excess on a paper towel by dabbing it until you're happy with the amount that's on there. Then apply away. Dabbing the brush along the largest areas and working it down the legs will help build up a transition into the grey. Apply a second layer into the areas that you may want to be a bit darker. Lightly stippling the paint on builds up a natural texture across the furs, even on the flatter parts. With the stippling wrapped up, the dark fur is almost complete. All that's needed now is a pick-me-up of grey cere, dry brushed over the light areas and a little bit over the tips of the textured fur, building on top of the faint highlights left already by the contrast paints along the sharper edges. After the final dry brush, the last Snarlfang is finished. The dark scheme has really come together, and the added texture from the stippling is taking it to the next level. With the final one done, we have 3 easy contrast schemes for any furry friend in your collection. For more painting videos, head on over to our YouTube channel. Or if you need more hands-on help, you can pop into one of our Warhammer stores where our friendly staff would be more than happy to help. Thanks for watching, ciao for now, and I'll see you in the next one.